This is Lesson 4 for writing notes about human services contacts with clients. This lesson focuses on writing other types of client notes. There's 3 parts to this lesson. First, we're going to talk about other types of client contacts, then talk about the templates that communicate the purpose of the note, and third, we're going to talk specifically about writing family interview notes. There are a number of other types of client contacts besides meeting with individual clients. There's group interviews or meetings, family interviews, and part of writing up client contacts may be writing client contact summaries. Human services client contacts may also include writing notes for collateral contacts and consultations, group counseling, community or planning meetings, family interviews, or writing case summaries are required for making referrals or for client treatment summaries or for case consultation. Collateral contacts are meetings or telephone calls with people who influence the client or have something to do with the client. This may include employers, schools, neighbors, churches, community centers, and child care centers. They're written similar to progress notes and filed with other client notes. Of course, when you are talking with anybody else about a client, you do need to take into consideration the client's privacy, so the client does need to give you permission to do so. But getting information from these sources are often very helpful. Client consultations occur with supervisors or colleagues or sometimes with multiple agencies working with the same client. Although these can be written similar to progress notes and may be filed with other client notes, there may be different agency policies and procedures about this, and so you want to check and see, is this something that would be filed with the client notes? When you're writing group counseling notes, they can be similar to individual counseling notes. They identify the persons present in the interview. They identify a present problem, and the assessment goals and the interventions are described. They can be different from individual counseling notes because they usually describe conversations and interactions between clients rather than describing each client in turn. The interventions can tend to focus on how clients help each other rather than how the worker uses intervention to help individual clients. Client group counseling notes consider the confidentiality of each client when the notes are filed in multiple client files. Sometimes you may use client first names so that it doesn't identify the client from another client's file. Other times you may write a note that just talks about what happens in the group interaction and then adds a separate note for each individual in the group that only goes into their file. In community or planning meetings, the client is generally a neighborhood, community, or region. Notes may sometimes document assessment and intervention and include confidential information because it documents a worker's efforts to help a particular neighborhood and to assess what's going on and develop some type of plan for addressing that. In this case, they're written similar to group counseling notes. Other times, community or planning meeting notes document meeting discussions and decisions or votes which are openly shared with community members. These tend to be written more like community meetings, meeting minutes. Family interviews primarily focus on the presenting problem and how it affects the whole family. They may consider family members as resources for helping an individual client. We're going to talk more about family interview notes in part 3 of this lesson. Client contact summaries summarize multiple client contacts and explain the level of goal achievement. They may have different purposes. They may provide information explaining the need for a referral, request consultation in order to improve intervention success, or summarize contacts at the end of treatment, such as a termination summary. They can also be used for case review. The amount of detail in a case summary is influenced by its purpose. Case summaries often describe the following elements: clients identifying information, the presenting problem and goals, the treatment timeline, the primary interventions, the evaluation of progress, and recommendations for addressing similar problems in the future. Note templates often communicate the purpose of the note, and they reflect what happens in the interview and the audience for the note. For example, individual client interviews communicate that there's a presenting problem, there's factors influencing the problem, workers' assessment, the client goal, the intervention, and the evaluation of success. Group counseling interviews communicate a presenting problem common to group members, educational presentation given by the worker, client interactions that help each other address the presenting problem, evaluation of success for the group and for the individuals in the group. Family interviews communicate how the presenting problem impacts all family members, how family interactions maintain or resolve the presenting problem, the goals and interventions which address the whole family. They may also evaluate how an individual member's presenting problem impacts the family or how the family may help resolve that individual's problem. Community meetings may communicate discussions and decision-making by voting, organized by the agenda. Assessment and intervention, similar to counseling interviews, may also occur in community meetings. It's helpful to consider the audience for a client note. Some notes are written to document the course of treatment and contain client-specific information which follows confidentiality guidelines. Other notes are distributed to group members and may be publicly available, and confidentiality is not expected. Case summaries may focus on communicating the worker's assessment and interventions to colleagues. Or they certainly may be available to be written for a client to eventually be able to check and see about the summary of their treatment. Certainly all notes should be written as if clients will eventually read them. The generic format for progress notes can fit multiple types of client interviews. This includes identifying the client name, the date and location of interview, the type of interview, whether it's an individual, a family, a group, a community, or a collateral meeting. The interview summary. It may include data, the status of the presenting problem, or updated information. The interventions occurring during the interview can be described. Assessment, the worker's updated assessment, or simply that the assessment is unchanged, that things are pretty much going as the worker thought they would. And finally, the plan, who will do what following the interview. Notes almost always are followed by the worker's signature at the end. Writing interview notes for families has some similarities to writing individual notes, but also some differences, such as having to identify the family member, describing interactions, and having the assessment and intervention focus on the family. Take a moment to review the assigned reading about writing family interview notes. What was familiar, or what did you already have experience with? What was new? What were some things that you didn't know before? How do these tips help you when writing notes for a family interview? Compared to individual interviews, family interviews are similar in that they describe the presenting problem, the factors influencing the presenting problem, goals, intervention, and evaluation of success. They're somewhat different in that they describe a presenting problem as it affects the whole family rather than describing a problem for what's often called an identified patient, where the family says one member of the family has the problem and that the worker is supposed to somehow fix that member without affecting the rest of the family. This isn't how families tend to interact. It tends not to be the dynamic that when you're working with families, it's easier to see how the whole family is affected by whatever the family is dealing with. Even when family members attend to help an individual member, that individual's presenting problem impacts the whole family. Family interactions often maintain the presenting problem, or they can be used to resolve the presenting problem, so communicating what those dynamics are is an important goal of writing a family note. Notes do not simply describe each individual family member in turn. They talk about interactions. Goals and interventions explain for the whole family rather than just for individual family members. When you're writing a family note, because there's many people in the interview, you need to clearly identify the family member. So you note who says what and does what. It's not really effective to write the interview was full of complaints about who did more work around the house. That's not very specific. It's clearer to write mother and children complained about each other's expectations about housework while father was silent. Mother complained that she had to nag both son and daughter to do their chores. Daughter complained that mother did not give her credit for helping with dinner every night, and son called mother a control freak. Each of these sentences explains specifically what individual family members stated, but it also expresses how those statements were forming interactions between different family members. It's important to objectively describe the family interactions, since these interactions often influence the presenting problem. In the previous example, the statement, mother and children complained about each other's expectations about housework while the father was silent, describes something that the worker could observe. It didn't describe something that the worker guessed. But describing this family interaction may indicate that mother and father do not join together when parenting the children. The sentences that follow this statement help describe a little bit more detail about the complaints, but this initial description of family interaction is likely to influence the worker's assessment about what is happening in the family. When you write assessment for family interviews, it's important to describe how the family interactions and dynamics influence the presenting problem. So rather than writing, mother is depressed and cannot care for children, father does not get home from work until late evening, daughter stays out late without telling parents where she is. Notice that this statement, these three statements may be true, but they don't really talk about how these particular aspects define an interaction that goes on between people in this family. So a better assessment would be mother's depressed feelings and father's long work hours appear to influence daughter's decision to spend time with friends without checking in with parents. Now, of course, this is an assessment based upon the worker listening and hearing what the family says and how they interact with one another. And so it doesn't necessarily, so you do have to evaluate whether this seems to be true. But it's an attempt by the worker to not only describe what is happening in each individual in the family, but to describe how the family operates together. When you write family interventions, it's more helpful to talk about family interventions that focus on family interactions. So, for example, worker will suggest ways that mother can challenge depressed feelings and will work with the daughter to create a log showing when she leaves a message for her parents. This suggests that the worker is going to work individually with mother and individually with daughter. Another example is if you write mother will get out of bed before daughter comes home from school and daughter will tell mother where she is going. Well, it implies that if mother's out of bed, then daughter can tell her where she's going, although it doesn't talk about that interaction. It also seems to be based upon the worker telling mother what to do and the worker telling daughter what to do. Part of the richness of working with families is helping them to resolve the problem by their own interactions. So it may be better to think about interactions and interfamily interventions by writing, family members will make an appointment with each other to discuss their expectations about spending time together and letting each other know their whereabouts. This means that the family's going to come up with their solution instead of having the worker define what the family should be doing. Now, the family may turn to the worker for suggestions, and the worker may be able to help the family by doing some interventions during the session, that if the family's having a difficult time talking about this, the worker may be able to help the individual family members while taking into consideration how what an individual family member says will affect what someone else says. And then part of documenting that is to talk about how the family members' statements actually impacted each other by being able to observe their statements as well as their feeling reactions that were shown when the family was talking about this. The family interview note format is organized the same as an individual client contact note. It describes family interactions in addition to individual member statements and behavior. It has some of the same elements, presenting problem history, assessment, goals and objectives, intervention and evaluations, but it tends to focus on the family. You may need additional categories to describe family interactions and the perceptions of multiple family members, since there's more members to take notes about during the family interview. This is the end of Lesson 4. Review the following example and then practice what you've learned. The following section presents an example of writing a note for an initial interview with the Baker family. It illustrates the steps that are discussed in this lesson, particularly writing a family note, and it shows an example that you can use for completing Lesson 4 Writing Lab. After you've watched the example, use what you've learned from this lesson and ideas that you wrote down during the lesson, and go to Lesson 4 Writing Lab and complete it.